The quiet creak of wagon wheels, the distant call of meadowlarks, and the promise of a new life in the West. Tonight, we step onto the Oregon Trail. The dawn begins not with a shout, but with a whisper. In the stillness of the plains, the world holds its breath as the eastern sky gently blushes with light. It is the kind of quiet that seems eternal, as if the earth itself has paused in reverence for the sun's arrival. The camp, sprawled on the edge of a grassy field, lies in half silence. Shapes of wagons, the faint silhouette of cattle, and the shadowy outlines of families just beginning to stir from their rest. A rooster crows, though faintly muffled, and somewhere a child's sleepy cry joins the soft hum of the morning. The Oregon Trail, stretching beyond the horizon, waits for those who dare its path. Today is the beginning of a journey westward, one that promises both hardship and hope, challenge and discovery. The wagons are not yet in motion, but they are alive with the quiet rustling of preparations. Canvas tops sag gently with dew, glistening in the growing light, and wagon wheels bear the marks of yesterday's travel. Their spokes still carry dust from miles behind, a reminder that this journey has already begun, though its full weight has yet to settle on those who travel it. Mothers rise first, often before the men, stepping carefully over sleeping children to coax embers in the fire back to life. With practiced hands, they fan flames into being, the thin threads of smoke rising into the cool air. The scent of wood smoke mixes with that of damp grass, a perfume of earth and fire that belongs to mornings like this. Soon, tin pans will sizzle with cornmeal mush or bread browned the night before, and kettles will send up steam that warms cold fingers wrapped around tin cups. Nearby, oxen stir. Their broad bodies shift against the harness poles, snorting and stamping softly in the dirt. They are the engines of this endeavor, steady, patient, and enduring. A boy, not yet 10, moves with small but important tasks, checking the knots of the yokes, carrying water in a tin pail, and patting the oxen's flanks as though offering encouragement. His gestures carry a weight beyond his years, for every hand, no matter how small, has purpose on the trail. The air grows brighter, tinged now with a golden hue as the sun's crown finally breaks free from the horizon. It illuminates the grasslands, painting every blade and wildflower with gentle light. The vastness of the prairie stretches endlessly, humbling those who stand at its edge. To many, it is daunting, an ocean of grass without compass or familiar landmark. Yet to others, it is freedom itself, space enough to begin anew, away from crowded towns and worn-out farmland. The children rub sleep from their eyes, squinting against the brightness. Some chase one another around wagon wheels, barefoot in the dew, their laughter a rare sound of ease before the day's march begins. Parents allow it for a moment, knowing the hours ahead will be long and demanding. Soon, the playful shrieks will give way to silence as feet grow tired and spirits are tested against the miles. But for now, in this first light, innocence still lingers. The wagon master moves among the camp, his voice steady but never harsh, reminding families of the day's plan. He wears his hat low, his coat worn from years of weather, and his stride has the confidence of one who has seen both triumph and disaster on this trail. To follow him is to put one's trust in his judgment, for the prairie is unforgiving of mistakes. There is ritual in this departure, even if the steps are ordinary. Wagons are loaded with precision, sacks of flour, barrels of salt pork, coffee, beans, and dried fruit carefully stowed. tools like saws, hammers, and spare wheel parts tucked into corners, keepsakes and family Bibles placed with reverence. These are the things they believe will carry them through, the necessities of survival and the fragments of home they cannot leave behind. For many, the trail is not simply about reaching Oregon, it is about holding on to hope. Hope that fertile land awaits them, hope that illness, storms, or accidents will spare their families, hope that every sunrise brings them closer to a life worth the leaving. That hope is fragile but powerful, stitched into every gesture of readiness, every tightened strap and whispered prayer. As the sun climbs higher, the call is given. The first wagons creak forward, their wheels groaning, their oxen pushing into the weight. Dust stirs behind them, the trail's earliest breath of the day. More wagons follow, forming a slow, deliberate procession, each family folding into the rhythm of departure. Boots crunch against dirt, dogs trot alongside, and the caravan grows into a moving village stretching across the plains. The camp that had been still and sheltered only moments before now empties into motion. Fires are smothered, leaving behind the faintest wisp of smoke. Bedrolls are tied, and stray tools are lifted into wagons. The ground shows the marks of their stay, ashes, footprints, and pressed grass. But the prairie will reclaim it soon enough. To those who travel, the trail is a series of departures and arrivals, one blending into the next, until the journey itself becomes a way of life. In the quiet between wagon wheels, the sound of the prairie itself rises, the rustle of wind in tall grass, the distant cry of a hawk, the murmuring rhythm of hooves and feet. It is steady, almost hypnotic, a reminder that while the trail may be new to those who travel it, the land has been here long before, patient and eternal. The first light of departure lingers only briefly. As the caravan stretches further, the morning shifts into the business of the day. Yet in the hearts of those who walk it, this dawn will remain, both a memory of hope and a marker of the unknown path ahead. For in this light, they are not yet weary, not yet worn. They are simply at the beginning, moving westward with the rising sun as their companion. The morning deepens, and the golden light of the rising sun spills gently across the encampment. The sounds of departure grow clearer now, not rushed or frantic, but measured, as though the earth itself is pausing to take notice of the journey about to unfold. The prairie grass rustles in the soft breeze, and the scent of dew rises into the air, mingling with the faint smoke of morning cookfires. Families stir within their tents or beneath the canvas coverings of their wagons. Mothers fold away quilts, carefully packing what little comfort they could carry from their homes back east. Fathers inspect wheels and axles, tightening ropes, checking yokes, ensuring that nothing has been left to chance. Children, drowsy-eyed but curious, wander between wagons, clutching small keepsakes or favorite books, too young to fully understand the distance that awaits them, but old enough to sense the adventure. The gathering of the caravan is an event in itself, a ritual of community and preparation. No one walks this trail alone. To cross the vast, untamed plains requires strength in numbers, not only for protection, but for companionship. Dozens of wagons align in rows, their white canvas tops glowing softly in the morning light, forming a kind of rolling village that will stretch for miles once the journey is underway. The leaders, often then chosen for their experience or wisdom, move from group to group, their voices low and steady as they coordinate the order of travel. Who will ride at the front, guiding the path westward, Who will ride alongside, scouting for water and safe grazing? Who will keep watch at the rear, ensuring no wagon is left behind? These decisions, though simple, mean the difference between safety and hardship. Amid the preparations, the animals are brought forth. Oxen, broad-shouldered and slow-footed, are harnessed to the wagons. Their steady pace, though unhurried, is reliable, and their strength, unmatched for hauling heavy loads across muddy rivers and rocky ground. Horses snort and paw the earth, eager for movement. Mules bray, stubborn but sure-footed, valuable for carrying burdens where wagons might falter. The animals too are part of the great company, their presence as vital as any human hand. From time to time, voices rise in greeting. Neighbors call across the rows of wagons, sharing news, offering small tokens of help. A rope here, a bit of spare cloth there. In this journey, generosity is not a luxury, but a necessity. The spirit of cooperation hums quietly, binding together strangers and friends alike into a single caravan with a common goal: to reach the distant western lands where promises of new beginnings wait. Children dart about, their laughter carrying lightly on the breeze. They chase one another between the wagons, playing small games while their elders work. A few sit patiently with their mothers, helping to gather cooking pots and utensils, or filling small sacks with dried beans, flour and salt pork, the staples that will sustain them on long days when fresh food is scarce. Even in their youth, the children absorb the rhythm of the trail, sensing that each task, no matter how small, contributes to the whole. There is within the bustle of preparation a quiet sense of reverence. Families know the road ahead will be long and uncertain. Some may never see the places they leave behind again. Yet, the promise of fertile land, of opportunity, of freedom, draws them onward. As they gather together, voices occasionally lift in prayer, simple words asking for safe passage, for strength, for mercy on the trail. These whispered hopes hang in the morning air, fragile yet powerful. As the last bundles are tied, the wagons begin to move slowly into formation. The leaders guide them into a line, each wagon following the one before, stretching across the meadow like a great white serpent winding toward the horizon. The wheels creak as they turn, wood pressing against metal, the first groans of a journey that will leave deep ruts in the earth for generations to come. Mothers lift children into the wagons, seating them among trunks, barrels, and sacks. Fathers walk alongside, hands resting on the wooden frames, steadying both wagon and spirit. Some travelers mount horses, taking positions to scout ahead or ride with companions. The caravan takes shape not as a mere collection of families, but as a moving community, a village on wheels, bound by necessity and courage. In these early hours, excitement still lingers in the air. Though fears of the unknown stir beneath the surface, the novelty of departure soothes them. The chatter of neighbors, the cries of animals, the crunch of wagon wheels over grass, all blend into a melody of motion, a song of beginnings. As the caravan gathers and prepares to set out, one cannot help but imagine the many voices that will echo along this trail in days to come. Songs sung by children, stories told by campfires, quiet prayers whispered beneath the stars. For now, though, all eyes turn westward. The path has been chosen. The wagons are ready. The journey begins not with a sudden leap, but with the steady, deliberate gathering of hearts, hands, and wheels. The prairie, vast and silent, waits patiently to receive them. The morning mist thinned as the wagons rolled farther from the riverbank, entering a new landscape that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Before them lay the vast open prairie, a world of tall grasses swaying gently in the breeze, dotted with wildflowers of yellow, blue, and white. It was a sight both breathtaking and intimidating, for in the openness there was little to shield travelers from wind, sun, or storm. Yet in its calm beauty, the prairie also promised possibility, as though it whispered of the land waiting beyond. The oxen trudged steadily forward, their hooves pressing paths through grasses that brushed against the wagon wheels. Birds swooped overhead, meadowlarks calling out their cheerful songs that carried across the empty air. Unlike the shaded forests they had passed through before, the prairie revealed everything in plain view. Wagon after wagon stretched in a long procession, each creaking forward with its family's hopes tucked inside. From a distance, it looked like a winding ribbon, slowly unraveling across the land. Children marveled at the openness. No trees to climb, no dense woods to get lost in, only rolling fields where the sky seemed impossibly wide. Some ran alongside the wagons, chasing butterflies that darted in flashes of color. Others walked quietly, their small hands brushing against the tall grass, watching seeds scatter in the wind. The prairie, though empty of buildings or towns, seemed alive with quiet energy, as though every gust of wind carried its own story. For the adults, the openness brought mixed feelings. The wide horizon offered no place to hide. The sun was already climbing higher, and with no shade, the heat pressed down with steady weight. The prairie wind, though cool, carried dust that clung to clothing and faces. Even so, the travelers spoke in hushed tones about its beauty. Some had never seen such space before. A few wondered aloud if the land ahead, once reached, might hold such fertile fields of grass for grazing cattle or rich soil for planting. As the day stretched on, the rhythm of the prairie took hold. The wagons moved slowly but steadily, each creak and groan blending with the low murmur of conversation and the steady sound of hooves. Meals were simple: bread, dried meat, perhaps a handful of berries gathered earlier. Families sat together on the ground when the wagons paused, eating quietly while gazing out over the endless expanse. It was a place that made one feel small, but not in a frightening way. Rather, it reminded them of the vastness of the world they were entering, and how their journey was just one thread in a much larger story. The prairie also carried subtle warnings. Wagon wheels sometimes caught in hidden ruts, or dipped into patches of softer earth where grasses concealed mud. The sun, unbroken by trees, reminded them to ration water carefully. Insects buzzed thickly, in places biting at both people and animals. Still, the pioneers pressed on with patience, reminding themselves that each mile gained was another step closer to their dreams. Evening on the prairie revealed another kind of beauty. As the sun dipped lower, the tall grasses glowed gold, shimmering in ways with the wind. Shadows stretched long across the open ground, and the air cooled with surprising swiftness. The wagons circled as night approached, forming a protective ring against the vast emptiness. Within, fires were lit, their smoke curling upward into the open sky, where stars would soon scatter more brightly than many had ever seen. Families sat close to the fires, listening to the prairie's evening songs, the distant call of a bird settling for the night, the rustle of grasses, the soft snort of oxen resting after their long pull. In the distance, Coyotes yipped, their cries echoing in the openness, reminding the travelers that the land was far from empty. Yet the circle of wagons felt safe, a small island of warmth in a sea of grass. As children drifted to sleep, parents spoke in quiet tones, sharing memories of home and hopes for the land ahead. Some looked up at the stars, naming constellations, imagining that those same stars watched over the families they had left behind. Others simply rested in the silence, comforted by the steady breathing of their companions and the knowledge that tomorrow would bring another stretch of prairie, another piece of the journey. The open prairie had tested them with sun, dust, and distance, but it had also given them perspective. Its vastness reminded them of the scale of their undertaking, yet it also offered a sense of freedom that few had known before. Out here, far from the crowded towns of the east, the land seemed to invite them forward. And so, as the fires crackled low and the stars grew bright, the travelers found themselves settling into the rhythm of the prairie, carrying both weariness and quiet hope into the night. The sun rises higher in the sky as the wagon train comes upon the wide, shimmering expanse of the Platte River. Its waters stretch out in glimmering channels, shallow in places, yet treacherous in their breadth. The river is not swift, but it is wide and sprawling, spreading itself across the landscape like a silver ribbon under the morning light. For many families, this is the first true test of their journey west. The prairie grasses give way to muddy banks, and the wagons gather at the edge of the water. Men and women climb down to walk the shoreline, studying the flow, seeking the safest place to ford. Children crouch near the bank, skipping stones and watching the ripples spread out. Oxen, heavy and patient, dip their heads to drink, their hooves sinking slightly into the damp ground. There is a stillness in the air, one born not of silence, but of anticipation. The Platte River is no ordinary stream to cross. Stories have traveled up and down the trail, of wagons overturned, of possessions lost to the current, of animals frightened midstream. Yet, just as often, tales are told of safe crossings, of laughter and relief when the far bank is reached. Each traveler hopes their family's story will belong to the latter. The scout, riding ahead, points to a section where the river looks shallowest. "Here," he says calmly, his horse's hooves sinking into the soft ground. The men nod, walking the bank again, tossing sticks into the current to watch how the water carries them downstream. The women gather children near the wagons, tying sunbonnets more tightly and securing little hands in their own. The air hums with the careful preparation that pioneers have come to know well. Rope checked, wheels tightened, goods secured beneath canvas covers. The first wagon edges forward. Its wheels creak against the wet soil before plunging into the water. The oxen lean into their yokes, straining with steady effort as their wagon floats slightly before settling back onto the sandy bottom. Water splashes against the spokes of the wheels, soaking the hems of skirts, darkening the trousers of those who walk beside the team. The driver clicks his tongue, calling softly to the oxen, urging them across. Behind, more wagons line up, each waiting for its turn. The river, though calm, proves stubborn. The current tugs at boots, pressing cold water against legs. Bundles strapped too high on wagons tip slightly, causing quick hands to reach out and steady them. A child, startled by the splash of water, cries out, only to be soothed with a gentle hand and a promise that the crossing will soon be over. As one wagon reaches the far side, cheers rise from its passengers. Relief washes over the group, and spirits lift. Those still waiting take encouragement, realizing the river can indeed be crossed. Soon, the second wagon enters, then a third, the line inching forward like a great wooden serpent threading its way through the shallow channels. Not all moments are easy. At one point, a wheel sinks deep into soft sand, and the wagon tilts precariously. Men rush to its side, pushing and straining, their voices sharp with urgency. Oxen grunt with effort, their muscles quivering under the strain. For a tense moment, it seems the wagon may tip, its load of bedding and tools spilling into the water. But with a final heave, the wheel lurches free, and the wagon rights itself. Cheers break out again, and the train presses onward. The river crossing takes hours. Each wagon must be guided carefully. Each family must endure the chill of water and the weight of nerves. Yet, there are moments of lightness too. Children laugh as they splash their way across, unconcerned by wet shoes. A dog bounds ahead, shaking water from its fur as it climbs the opposite bank. Sunlight glints off the water, turning the entire scene into something almost beautiful. Even in its difficulty. By afternoon, the last wagon reaches the far shore. Families gather on dry ground, spreading blankets to rest. Fires are lit to dry damp clothing, and kettles soon bubble with simple stews. Travelers look back across the river, watching its surface ripple under the wind, and feel a quiet pride. They have conquered one more obstacle, endured one more trial. The Platte, wide and stubborn, now lies behind them. As night falls, the glow of campfires dances against the darkening sky. The sound of the river lingers faintly in the distance, a reminder of the day's effort. Children drift to sleep, wrapped in quilts, listening to the murmurs of voices recounting the crossing. Parents sit side by side, weary yet grateful, their gazes fixed westward. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but tonight they rest knowing they have overcome one of the most daunting trials of the trail. The Platte River crossing will remain in memory, an emblem of perseverance, a story to be told when the journey is complete. And as stars scatter across the vast prairie sky, the river's voice becomes just another part of the land's song, fading into the rhythm of the long road still ahead. The prairie had been wide and forgiving, its rolling grasses stretching like an endless green sea. But as the days pushed on, the travelers discovered that the Oregon Trail, though filled with moments of beauty, was also a path of hardship. For every sunrise that painted the horizon in gold, there was another trial waiting, quiet and unseen, to test their endurance. The morning began with the creak of wagon wheels as oxen were yoked and readied. Dust rose in soft clouds, coating boots, skirts, and wagon spokes alike. What seemed at first like an inconvenience soon became one of the daily burdens. Dust clung to the throat, leaving a dryness that no sip of water could fully quench. Mothers wrapped cloths around their children's faces, hoping to shield them, while fathers pulled their wide-brimmed hats low to keep the sun and grit away. The children, ever resilient, laughed at first, chasing each other through the haze. But even their play slowed as the heat deepened. The prairie sun could be relentless, a steady blaze that drained the body of strength. Those unused to such exposure learned to pace themselves, walking slowly beside the wagons, conserving energy. Some stretched canvas over the wagon tops for shade, while others found small comfort in wide cotton bonnets or dampened cloths tied around the neck. Food, too, became a trial. The travelers had set out with barrels of flour, salt pork, beans, dried apples, and hardtack. At first, the meals were hearty enough to fill empty stomachs, yet as days turned to weeks, appetites began to weary of the sameness. The salt pork, heavy and greasy, often sat uneasily in the stomach after long hours of walking. The hardtack, brittle as stone, required soaking before it could be chewed without breaking a tooth. Dried apples brought sweetness, but only in small measure. Still, mealtime offered comfort. Families gathered by they had, laughing at small jokes, singing quiet songs to lift their spirits. Even in hardship, there was a rhythm that steadied them. The greatest burden, however, came not from the dust, the heat, or the simple food, but from the unexpected trials that could appear at any moment. Wagons, for all their sturdy build, were not immune to the trail's punishing miles. A wheel could crack on a hidden stone. An axle, worn thin by endless turning, might splinter. The sound of breaking wood would bring the entire train to a halt. Men would gather to inspect the damage, tools in hand, while women calmed anxious children. Sometimes a repair was quick, just the tightening of a bolt or a replacement of a spoke. Other times it meant hours of labor beneath the hot sun. Oxen, too, bore the weight of the journey. Strong as they were not tireless. Blisters formed on their hooves, sores rubbed raw beneath the harness. A stumble could lame a beast. Slowing the entire company, travelers knew the health of their animals was as important as their own, for without them, the wagons could not move forward. Buckets of water were carefully rationed to keep both man and beast alive. Grasslands, when found, were treasured places of rest, giving the oxen a chance to graze and regain strength. Illness was another shadow along the trail. The dreaded word, cholera, spread quietly in whispers among the travelers. A single cough, a sudden fever, or a sharp stomach pain could bring fear. The close quarters of camp, the shared water barrels, the lack of fresh supplies, all made disease a constant worry. Some families carried medicines, but these were limited and often ineffective against the worst ailments. For many, faith and prayer became the only remedies when illness struck. Despite these hardships, the spirit of the travelers endured. Each difficulty seemed to bring the company closer together. When one wagon faltered, others lent their tools. When a child fell ill, neighbors offered broth, blankets, or simple words of comfort. The trail was harsh, but it forged bonds stronger than steel. Evenings became the balm to the day's trials. As fires were lit and supper cooked, the hardships of the day softened in the quiet of twilight. The prairie, for all its cruelty, also gave beauty in return. Sunsets painted the sky with broad strokes of crimson and violet, and the first stars twinkled above like lanterns in the heavens. In those moments, the travelers found solace. Children fell asleep to the crackle of campfires, their small hands clutching rag dolls or simple wooden toys. Mothers mended torn clothing by the light of the flames, while fathers sat polishing tools, checking harnesses, or planning the miles ahead. Psalms drifted across the camp. Soft hymns, fiddle tunes, and the low murmur of voices telling stories. These small rituals gave strength to continue, reminding each weary soul why they pressed onward. The promise of new land, a new life, a new beginning waiting at the trail's end. And so, though the trials of the trail tested body and spirit alike, the journey continued, step by step, mile by mile, wagon by wagon, the company endured. The hardships were not simply obstacles, they were lessons in endurance, in patience, and in unity. The prairie night settled in, cool and quiet, wrapping itself around the camp like a protective cloak. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new chances. The travelers closed their eyes with the knowledge that they had faced the day's trials and emerged still moving forward. And that, on the Oregon Trail, was victory enough. The prairie sky had always been vast and unbroken, a dome of blue by day and a canopy of stars by night. But one afternoon, as the caravan pressed forward across the endless grasslands, that sky began to change. A thin, dark line appeared along the western edge, faint at first, like a brushstroke against the horizon. Slowly, steadily, it grew and rose, until even the most optimistic traveler could not deny what it meant. A storm was coming. The children, still chasing after prairie dogs and grasshoppers in the tall weeds, were gathered back close to the wagons as mothers noticed the deepening shadow rolling over the land. Oxen, usually steady and slow, tossed their heads uneasily, feeling the shift in the air before the first clap of thunder had sounded. Even the prairie birds fell quiet, disappearing into the grass as if they knew what was about to unfold. The caravan leader called for everyone to tighten the ropes on their wagon covers. Canvas tops were checked and secured, poles reinforced, and anything loose was lashed down or packed away. Families hurried to gather firewood and water before the first raindrops fell. Children were lifted into wagons, their laughter stilled now by the anxious glances of their parents. Then, as if the heavens themselves had been waiting, the storm broke. A sharp crack split the sky, and lightning streaked down in jagged silver forks, striking somewhere far across the prairie. A low rumble followed, growing louder with each heartbeat until it shook the ground itself. The oxen bellowed nervously, straining at their yokes. Rain fell in sudden sheets, drenching the prairie grass and turning the dusty trail to mud within moments. For those inside the wagons, the world became a cocoon of sound, the pounding rain against canvas, the rattling of wooden frames, the whimper of children pressed against their mothers' skirts. Some clutched their Bibles and whispered prayers. Others kept their eyes fixed on the wagon walls, willing them to hold. Outside, men fought the storm with whatever strength they had. They waded through rising puddles, pressing stakes deeper into the ground to keep wagons upright. They guided frightened animals, stroking their damp hides and speaking in calming tones to keep them from bolting. Every crack of lightning revealed the silhouettes of people, wagons, and animals, caught in that eerie white light for just an instant before the darkness swallowed them again. And then came the wind. It roared across the plains with a force that bent the grasses flat and rattled every wagon like a toy. Canvas covers strained and snapped. Families held fast to poles and ropes, pulling together to keep their little worlds from being ripped apart. The prairie, so open and wide, offered no shelter. There were no trees, no rocky outcrops, no walls to hide behind. The travelers stood exposed, small figures against the fury of the storm. Time lost its shape in that chaos. Minutes felt like hours. Each roll of thunder, each flash of lightning seemed to echo without end. Yet, as all storms do, this one eventually began to pass. The thunder grew more distant. The sheets of rain thinned to a steady drizzle. The heavy black clouds rolled onward, leaving behind a land soaked and glistening. Steaming faintly in the dim light of the late afternoon sun. When the storm finally loosened its grip, the prairie was transformed. Puddles mirrored the sky, and rivulets of water trickled along the wagon ruts. Wet canvas sagged under the weight of water, and mud clung to boots, skirts, and wheels. The air smelled sharp and clean, washed of dust, filled with the sweet scent of wet grass. Families emerged slowly, faces pale but relieved. Mothers wrung water from their skirts. Fathers checked for damage to wagons and supplies. Children stomped through puddles, their fear already forgotten. The oxen, too, stood calmer now, chewing wet grass as if the storm had never happened. For the weary pioneers, the trial had been yet another reminder of the power of the land they were crossing. The prairie was not merely a road to be traveled. It was a force to be endured. It tested their resolve in ways small and large, demanding strength, faith, and unity. That night, as the wagons circled on high, dry ground, campfires flickered weakly in the damp air. Families huddled together, still shivering in damp clothes, but grateful to be safe. A prayer of thanks rose among them, a soft chorus of voices mingling with the lingering patter of rain. The children, tired from fear and excitement, drifted into sleep quickly, their dreams filled with thunderclouds and lightning. And when the sky finally cleared, the stars returned, brilliant and unshaken. The prairie stretched out, endless once again, as if the storm had never come. But for those who traveled onward, its memory would remain, a reminder that the journey was not only across miles of land, but through every trial that nature could summon. Each storm survived was another step forward, another proof that they had the strength to continue west, toward a land they had not yet seen, but believed in with all their hearts. As the sun leaned lower in the sky, its golden rays stretching across the prairie like warm fingers, the wagons began to slow their pace. The long day of travel had tested both body and spirit, but now came the familiar rhythm of evening. This was the hour of preparation, when the caravan would gather into its protective embrace, the circle of wagons. It was a sight as old as the trail itself, both practical and symbolic, a way to draw strength from one another under the wide and endless sky. The lead wagon slowed first, the driver guiding his oxen carefully to the left. One by one, the others followed, turning inward until the great circle began to form. Wooden wheels creaked, iron rims clinked against stones, and the low groans of weary animals filled the air. Soon the line of wagons curved into a ring, a fortress of wood and canvas, open to the heavens above. Inside the circle, space was cleared for cooking fires, gathering families, and sometimes even forsays, tea, the livestock, who needed protection as much as their human companions. Children delighted in the moment. To them, the circle was not only safety, but also play. They scampered between wagons, their laughter bright against the hush of evening. Parents called after them, reminding them to fetch water, gather sticks, or help with chores. But the children knew that after duties came stories, songs, and the comfort of being together. The air held the smell of dust and sagebrush, mingled now with wood smoke as fires were struck. Travelers pulled bundles from the wagons, sacks of flour, salted pork, beans, and precious coffee grounds. Blackened kettles hung above crackling flames, and the aroma of simple meals rose into the dusk. Some stirred pots of stew, while others baked bread in Dutch ovens buried beneath glowing coals. The food was plain, yet after long hours of jolting over uneven ground, it tasted like a feast. As the fires burned, voices filled the air. Men mended harnesses, checking leather straps for wear. Women patched clothing or tended to scraped knees and tired feet. Teenagers gathered in clusters, whispering, laughing, and sometimes stealing shy glances at one another. There was comfort in these small routines, a reminder that life carried on even in the wilderness. When the sun finally slipped below the horizon, shadows deepened, and the circle of wagons glowed with the flicker of firelight. Sparks danced upward, vanishing into the purple sky. Someone began to hum a tune, low and steady. Others joined in, their voices weaving together into an impromptu chorus. Songs of home, hymns of faith, and simple melodies of the trail drifted across the plain. Even those who did not sing found solace in the sound, for music carried memories and gave shape to hope. Stories followed. Around each fire, voices spoke of past journeys, of dangers overcome, of dreams waiting at the journey's end. A father might tell his children about the green valleys of Oregon, where the soil was said to be rich and the rivers ran clear. Another might recall a storm survived, or a river crossed when hope had nearly been lost. These stories were more than entertainment. They were a reminder of resilience, a gentle assurance that tomorrow's trials could also be met. Animals bedded down nearby, their shapes dim in the firelight. Oxen chewed slowly on what grass they could find, their bodies swaying with exhaustion. Horses stamped and snorted, tails flicking against the persistent flies. Dogs curled close to their owners, ears pricking at distant sounds across the prairie. The night was alive with small noises, the chirp of crickets, the low call of a night bird, the faint rustle of wind through dry grass. Each sound blended into a symphony of the plains, at once strange and soothing. For the weary travelers, sleep came in stages. First, the children, their heads nodding against their eye, mother's shoulders before being carried to soft bedding in the wagons. Then, the elders, resting stiff joints and tired bones. Finally, the adults, who lingered by the fading fires to share one last word or gaze into the distance, where the stars now spilled across the dark sky like scattered pearls. The prairie sky was vast beyond measure, a reminder of both the enormity of the journey and the smallness of each individual life within it. Yet, within the circle of wagons, there was a sense of belonging. Strangers became neighbors, and neighbors became friends. Each wagon was a home, but together they formed a community. If danger came, whether from storms, hunger, or the uncertainty of the road, it would be faced together. The circle was more than wood and canvas. It was trust, solidarity, and hope given shape. The fires dimmed to embers, glowing faintly in the night. The wagons loomed like guardians, standing firm against the dark. Overhead, the moon rose, bathing the prairie in pale light. The Oregon Trail stretched onward, unseen but ever-present, a ribbon of possibility leading westward. Tomorrow, the wagons would roll again. But for tonight, they rested, encircled by their own strength and the quiet promise of another dawn. And so the circle of wagons became not just a ritual, but a memory etched into every heart. For those who made the journey, this nightly gathering would remain forever. A symbol of safety on the open prairie, a reminder of how the smallest comforts could carry weary souls toward a brighter horizon. The prairie, once endless and open, slowly gives way to new shapes on the horizon. At first, they are no more than faint smudges, hazy and distant. But with each passing day, they sharpen into jagged forms, cutting against the sky like teeth. The mountains. For weeks, the emigrants have spoken of them in half whispers, both in awe and in worry. Now, at last, they rise before the wagons, immense and immovable. The Oregon Trail was never meant to be easy, but the sight of mountains reminds everyone that the true hardships may still lie ahead. The prairie had been wide, flat, and forgiving in its way, but the mountains stand like a wall, daring the travelers to climb, to cross, to endure. The children are the first to marvel at the sight. They run ahead, pointing, their voices bright with excitement. To them, the mountains are magical, like castles in the clouds. The adults, however, see them differently. They see snow, still clinging to the highest ridges, even in the warmth of summer. They imagine steep passes, sudden storms, and narrow trails where wagons might tip and crash. Hope and fear mix together as the mountains cast their shadow across the trail. Each morning, the peaks seem closer, looming larger in the blue sky. The air grows thinner, cooler, touched with a crispness the prairie never knew. The land itself changes. Grasses give way to scrub, and the soft rolling earth hardens into rock. The wagons creak and groan as the wheels strike stone after stone. Oxen strain against their yokes, muscles rippling, breath heavy in the thin air. At night, campfires burn brighter against the darkened sky. Stars shimmer above the mountains with sharp clarity, as though the heavens themselves have drawn closer. Around the flames, the emigrants speak of what lies beyond. Some whisper of fertile valleys, where rivers flow clear and soil is dark and rich. Others worry of narrow canyons, where sound echoes and danger hides. The songs of the trail change too, where once laughter carried across the open prairie, now voices lower to hushed tones, as though not to disturb the giants that rise ahead. The mountains are no longer distant dreams. They are here, waiting. Children still find joy in their presence. They collect strange new flowers along the base, their petals bright and hardy. They chase butterflies that flutter in the thin mountain breezes. For them, it is all adventure. For their parents, it is trial. Yet one truth binds them all. There is no turning back. Crossing the mountains is not just of strength. It is a test of will. Each traveler knows it. Each family feels it. And so they gather around their fires, they mend their boots, they tighten their wagon wheels, and they prepare. The prairie has ended. The shadow of the mountains stretches long, and within it, the emigrants steel themselves for what is to come. The mountains silent and eternal watch over them. The days had begun to shorten. The long heat of the prairie summer was softening, and though the sun still beat down with strength, the air carried a whisper of change. As the wagon train pressed further west, the travelers began to hear murmurs of the Blue Mountains. These towering ridges, spoken of in hushed tones by scouts and fellow travelers, stood like guardians of the passage to Oregon. To some, the idea of climbing such formidable heights was daunting. To others, it was a sign that the end of their journey was drawing nearer. For many weeks, the land had seemed endless. Rolling plains, sagebrush, and stretches of dusty ground that carried no end in sight. But now, on clear mornings, Faint shapes appeared far in the distance. At first, they looked like smudges against the horizon, like shadows left by the rising sun. Then, as the days passed, they grew sharper, darker, their slopes climbing toward the sky. The blue mountains, grand, immovable, and silent, beckoned with a mixture of promise and peril. As the wagons creaked forward, each family grew more aware of the challenge ahead. Around campfires at night, people spoke of narrow paths and steep grades. The wheels would need careful guiding, and the oxen would strain harder than ever before. Yet there was also hope. Beyond those mountains, they said, lay the valleys of Oregon, fertile ground, flowing rivers, and a chance to rest from the long road. The trail in these days was filled with contrasts. Some mornings, the wagon train passed through grassy meadows where wildflowers still bloomed, their colors bright against the pale earth. Deer darted from the edges of groves, and once a traveler claimed to have seen a bear vanish into the undergrowth. Other times, the trail wound through dry, dusty land where even the hardiest plants seemed weary. Each mile was a reminder of both the beauty and the harshness of the wilderness. Water, always a precious concern, became even more treasured. Streams appeared less often now, and when they did, families hurried to refill their barrels, wash their clothes, and let the oxen drink deeply. Children played in the shallow pools, their laughter rising into the still air, brief moments of joy amid the weight of travel. At night, under the stars, the sound of running water often became part of dreams, both a comfort and a reminder of its scarcity. Food supplies, too, were closely guarded. After months on the trail, barrels of flour and cornmeal had grown lighter. Dried beans, salted pork, and hardtack had sustained them, but the meals had grown plain, with little variety. Some families still carried a handful of apples or dried peaches, precious treasures saved for when spirits ran low. Others turned to the land, foraging for roots and berries when they could find them. Every meal was carefully measured, each crumb considered against the long road still ahead. One evening, as the sun sank behind the far-off mountains, the wagons circled for camp. Fires flickered in the growing dusk, casting warm light upon tired faces. A hush fell over the group as the shadows lengthened and eyes turned toward the horizon. The blue mountains seemed closer than ever, their outlines clear against the fading glow. For many, it was the first true glimpse of the next great challenge. Some whispered prayers, others sat in silence, staring at the looming ridges with quiet determination. There was something almost spiritual about that moment. The mountains were not just obstacles of stone and earth. They were symbols. They marked the border between what had been endured and what was still to come. To pass through them would mean drawing nearer to the dream that had pulled them westward through hardship, danger, and uncertainty. Children, unburdened by such thoughts, ran among the wagons, their laughter carrying into the night. A mother hummed a lullaby, the gentle tune weaving through the campfires. An old man recited a psalm softly, his voice blending with the crackle of flames. And all the while, the mountains stood watching, silent and patient, as they had for countless ages. When sleep finally settled over the camp, dreams were filled with winding trails, shaded forests, and rivers running cold and clear. Some dreamed of farms waiting to be built, cabins nestled in green valleys, and orchards heavy with fruit. Others dreamed only of rest, of a place to set down their burdens and no longer wake to the creak of wagon wheels and the endless horizon. As dawn approached, the camp stirred once more. Fires were rekindled, harnesses strapped, and the creak of wheels began anew. The mountains were waiting. Each turn of the wheel brought them closer, each step of the oxen echoing the resolve of those who walked beside them. The blue mountains rose steadily, vast and unmoving, their peaks touched with the golden light of morning. And as the wagon train drew nearer, the travelers knew that their long journey was nearing its most demanding test yet. The wagons creaked into motion once more, though this time the sound carried a different note. It was no longer the grinding effort of endless days across a hostile trail. Instead, it was the measured, steady rhythm of a journey nearing its close. For weeks upon weeks, families had endured wind, rain, rivers, and dust, but now the promise of the valleys ahead filled the air like a hymn of relief. The first glimpse came at dawn. As the sun spread its pale light over the horizon, the mountains gave way to softer shapes, rolling hills carpeted with grass, dotted with groves of oak and maple. Beyond them stretched fertile valleys, the land green and open, as though it had been waiting patiently all along. A hush fell across the camp as wagons slowed and travelers gazed at what seemed like a new world unfolding before them. For many, it was the first time in months they felt something close to peace. The danger of the plains, the long droughts, the fear of swollen rivers, all of it seemed to fade as the trail wound gently downward into the rich earth of the valleys. Mothers pressed hands to their hearts. Fathers breathed deep, and children pointed, marveling at the sight of a land that seemed to sing of rest and renewal. The final miles were quiet, almost reverent. Oxen trudged without hurry, as though they too knew the journey was at its end. Campfires glowed softer at night, the conversations around them less anxious, more hopeful. People spoke of building cabins by the rivers, barns among the meadows, fences to shape fields of wheat and corn. Dreams that had once felt like fragile whispers on the wind now stood within reach. When at last the wagons rolled into the valley floor, the air itself seemed to shift. It was warmer, touched with the sweetness of wildflowers, and the soil beneath their feet was dark and rich. Children ran through tall grasses, gathering handfuls of blossoms to carry back to their mothers. The oxen were unyoked, their heavy burdens lifted for the last time. For the first time in months, families slept without the restless stirrings of the trail. In the morning, hammers rang out against wood, saws bit into fresh-cut logs, and the first outlines of new homes began to rise. The journey had been one of trial and hardship, but here, at the edge of fertile valleys, the pioneers laid claim to more than just land. They claimed the right to begin again, to shape lives with their own hands, to root themselves in soil that promised sustenance and peace. For years to come, stories of this journey would echo in kitchens and firesides. Children would listen wide-eyed as their parents told of nights under endless stars, of rattling wagon wheels across the prairie, of rivers that threatened to sweep them away, and of mountains that tested their will. And always the stories would end with this valley, the green promise at the end of a long road. The Oregon. The Oregon. The Oregon Trail had been more than a road westward. It had been a crucible, shaping those who dared to walk it into something stronger. With each step, each hardship, each mile endured, they had carved not just a path through wilderness, but a future for themselves and generations yet to come. As the sun dipped low over the valley, painting the land in gold, the wagon stood still, no longer restless, no longer searching. The journey was over, and the world ahead, open, fertile, alive, was theirs at last.